So good morning to everyone. Welcome to all of our observers. I assume, good afternoon, Mark and Sammy. Great to see you on screen. Okay, we're going to begin our third and final day of this plenary session with turning to our favorite topic, Pie Track 2, which we will move towards approval, which is great news. Everyone will have received the updated agenda paper with the proposed revisions for approval. I'm going to hand it over to Sue and Isabel and Ida.
Okay, Tom. Well, thank you. Thank you. And as Tom said, you've had the papers. We've not received any questions or comments offline, Tom. So I think we're probably okay to go into approval if people are ready, if there are any questions.
Okay, let me pause before we go to approval and ask if there are any comments or questions. Seeing that there are none, before we go to any voting, I'm going to ask Mark if the PIOB has any final observations before we do vote on these amendments.
No, I think we had a full discussion of them on Monday, and I believe that the amendments that were made to the draft that was tabled on Monday are relatively minor and certainly reflect the discussion. So I don't have anything further to add.
Thank you very much, Mark. Okay, so as project chair, I think it's my turn to turn to you on due process considerations.
Okay, thank you very much. So in terms of due process, the project team's due process considerations in coordination with Vili as Programme and Senior Director are included in Part E of Agenda Item 3, which was posted publicly on the IAASB's meeting webpage on the 30th of May. For specific matters identified by the project team, in the project team's view, the significant matters that the PI Task Force up to December 2024 and the project team thereafter have identified through its deliberations since we started work on developing the PI Track 2 narrow scope amendments to the ISQM's ISAs and ISRA 2400 revised have been reflected in the agenda materials presented to the IAASB at its meetings. In the project team's view, there are no significant matters discussed by the PI Task Force or the project team in developing these narrow scope amendments that have not been brought to the IAASB's attention. Taking into account the post-exposure consultation that was undertaken after the December 2024 IAASB meeting, the outreach and coordination undertaken through the life cycle of the project, and the additional steps outlined in Agenda Item 3, the project team does not believe that any further consultation is warranted before finalising the PI Track 2 narrow scope amendments. Tom, I think that summarises the due process matters you need from us.
Thank you very much. Now it's my turn to call on Vili to address the due process considerations from his perspective.
Thank you, Tom, and good morning, everyone. So I refer the board to Agenda Item 9. Agenda Item 9 sets out the due process followed up to the date of the June 2025 IAASB meeting in relation to PI Track 2. And I'm happy to advise the board that the proposed narrow scope amendments to ISQM's ISAs and ISRA 2400 revised have been developed in accordance with IAASB due process up to and including this meeting, and with proper regard to the public interest as reflected in the achievement of the project objectives for those elements of the ED that we did finalise, as well as the rationale for finalising those elements. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Vili. Okay, so does anyone have an objection to voting on the narrow scope amendments as set out in Agenda Item 3D? Is everyone clear what we're voting on when we go to a vote? Okay. Since Warren's no longer on the board, I'm gonna take a guess that we're gonna have people supporting this proposal. So I will ask for a show of hands on who supports the revisions as set out in agenda item 3D. Okay, let the record show that it has full support of the 16 board members. So thank you for that. I'm gonna turn it back to Sue right now to ask about, sort of have to amused by this, whether we feel like we need to re-expose. Sue, how about it? You just want to keep going?
We need to do this properly, Tom, but yeah, I smiled when I realised that I had to talk about this again. So in terms of consideration of the need for re-exposure, Part E of Agenda Item 3 presents the project team's analysis of whether PI Track 2 narrow scope amendments need to be re-exposed. After the board agreed on the pre-FINO narrow scope amendments in December 2024, only limited revisions were suggested based on the input received from the post-exposure consultation as reflected in Agenda Item 3A and the discussions we had. The table in paragraph 65 of Agenda Item 3 summarises the revisions to the definitions and requirements in the ISQM's, ISAs and ISRE 2400 revised since the ED, with the further changes that were discussed during this meeting as reflected in Agenda Item 3D. The project team is of the view that the PI Track 2 narrow scope amendments do not warrant re-exposure. Back to you, Tom.
Thank you very much. So we're going to take a vote here. Does any board member feel as if re-exposure is required? Okay, I see no hands, so we will not be re-exposing PI Track 2 narrow scope amendments again. So at this point, I'm going to ask Billy to comment on a couple of matters, including the effective date.
Thank you, Tom. And just to reconfirm for the record, as we discussed on Monday, and as we intended throughout the course of this project, we wanted the effective dates to line up, with the effective date of the fraud and going concern projects. So the effective date will be for audits of financial statements or reviews commencing for periods commencing on or after December 15, 2026. Just want to remind the board that we will, however, clarify in the basis for conclusion, also as discussed on Monday, that we encourage that the three standards are adopted as a package, but it's obviously not mandated. And actually the basis for conclusion that was already circulated to the board already reflects the updated wording. The other comment that I just want to make is to just remind the board to please do send through your comments on the basis for conclusion by close of business on Friday. The one item that I do want to flag, because that's not in the basis for conclusion that you have and that you will be commenting on, but we will be making a change, adding a sentence or two to just reflect one of the matters that came up last week at the ethics board meeting, which Sue did highlight on Monday as well, to just make it very clear in the basis for conclusion that the intention of both boards are that the refinements that are made to the PTE definition is in accordance with the same overarching objective and purpose in mind. So you shouldn't get to a different answer for purposes of the ISQMs and ISAs compared to for purposes of the ethics code. Thank you, Tom.
Okay, thank you, Billy. First of all, I want to congratulate the team. I'm not sure I'm congratulating them just for the technical accomplishments, which are real for this, but for the persistence and the patience shown in this process, which was almost a superhuman feat here. So thank you for that. Sue, particular thanks to you for your leadership and your patience and your calm approach to dealing with every curveball we've thrown at you all along the way. But I wanted to ask you right now if you had any final comments to share with us on this journey.
Thank you. Just a few. Actually, it's quite funny you say about the persistence, because when I was talking with Villy about coming back to this meeting, we were talking about whether I did it remotely, and we concluded that this is the project that has kept on giving throughout its life, and it was probably better to be available in person should anything else crop up. But overall, obviously, I'm delighted. I know the team is absolutely delighted that we are finally approved and able to move on with our lives, I think, probably. But obviously, thanks for the board for their feedback. Villy touched on the basis for conclusions. If we could have any fatal flaws on that as soon as possible, that would be really helpful. We're aiming to work on that at the very beginning of next week to make sure we turn it round and get it to the PIOB as soon as possible. I did say on Monday that there've been a lot of people involved in this. I did have a crack at trying to get the names, so I am going to try and thank everybody who's been involved. Past and present board members and everything. Josephine kicked some of this off. We had Fernando and Chun Wee, previous board members. Eric from Canada. Susan, who's sitting behind me. Hernan. Sung Nam from the ethics board was a correspondent member. Kalina had a go at this at one point as well. Tom, I think you very nearly became an honorary member of the task force this time last year. So I think, obviously very, very grateful for the support, and Villy as well has been very active here. But the two ladies beside me, Isabel and Ida, have really carried the load particularly over the last 6 months, and have also, I think, demonstrated that resilience to just keep on going through all sorts of challenges. So I'm delighted that we've got here. So thank you for the support. I shall be watching with interest as you go into PyTrack 3 at some point. I think we had a really good discussion on Monday, and I do urge the board to keep in mind some of the points that we raised there to really help set up for success, because there is a prize there. But I will just finish with wishing you good luck with PyTrack 3, and thanks for that.
I think it's always thank you for those remarks, and again, thank you to the team. And I think more than anything else, like we always do, you guys deserve the round of applause that you're about to receive. So thank you. Okay, so Mark, any final observations for the PIOB before we close this part of our board meeting?
No observations, but just to note, as I think I said on Monday, that it won't be possible for us to consider certification of PyTrack 2 at our upcoming meeting in just over a week's time. But we are considering having a special meeting of the PIOB at some point in the summer to actually do that once we've had the various papers we need from you and have had time to go through our own due process.
Thank you very much.
Again, my congratulations also to you and the team for finally getting through this one. It has been quite a trial, I realize.
Thanks. Okay. So thank you to the PyTrack 2 team. I think what we'll do is ask the technology quality management workstream team to come to the table right now. I don't expect a long break, but just a little bit of a pause as we switch seats. Okay, just a reminder in terms of the way this is going to run today. We're going to start with with an introduction and a guest presentation by Reba Schwartz, who will offer her perspective, who's an expert in linguistics, measurement science, and AI governance. She's the chief architect of the U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology's AI risk management framework. I think her insights will be very helpful for us to think about the topic. So we'll run to about 10:20, then we'll break, and then we'll have breakout groups towards lunchtime. And then we'll reconvene after lunch. And I think the board felt it was really important to reconvene to share on the public record some of the insights and the conclusions and the themes that will drive some of our thinking afterwards. And then we'll close the plenary. So let me give you a little bit of background on where I think where we are and why this quality management work stream is so important. So our quality management standards, I think, are working well or in the process of being implemented. However, since we approved our quality management standards, the advances in AI and other emerging tech have been significant and are already being deployed by reporting entities and audit firms throughout the world. And as our technology statement says, our goal is to find ways to encourage innovation in the name of audit quality. And indeed, these technologies are being developed at a firm level. And if you look at ISQM1, we may have robust principles, but there's not much guidance relative to, say, other areas in terms of how to implement paragraph 32F and the application material. So the question is can we provide appropriate clarity to help spur innovation? And that's a key insight that we've continually heard in the public marketplace about clarity spurs innovation, it avoids fragmentation, it avoids regulatory non-acceptance. And is there things that we could do building off our QM1 framework and ISA 220 that could be helpful in a way to provide certainty to the marketplace so advanced technologies could be deployed in the name of the public interest? This is not about rewriting or reopening ISQM1, but it is about offering timely and useful, most likely guidance as a first step. Now, I won't ever preclude standard setting because maybe the market will tell us that standard setting is ultimately the way that we should go. But that has to be driven by evidence. And that's precisely why we're in the strong information gathering engagement process. We're listening right now, and it's really important as a board that we listen and help design in an open-minded way so we can fulfill our objectives of the technology statement, which is to encourage technology where it can be augmenting audit quality and improving public confidence. To me, not only is this a question of public trust in the profession, but it's a question of making the profession viable and practical and attractive going forward, because future generations of auditors and assurance practitioners certainly will want to be engaged with sophisticated techniques as much as possible and not live in an analog world. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Angelo to set out what's coming up in this public session, and then we'll go to the breakout groups after the break.
All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much. So I thought, Tom, before I build on your comments a little bit, I thought I'd I'd introduce the team to the board, and hopefully you'll allow me a couple of minutes to do that because this was a really big collective effort. So next slide. So here's the beautiful team. Kevin is seconded to us from PwC. He comes from the private company assurance practice where he advises audit teams on technology use. He's been playing a really critical role in this project since it started. So a big thank you to Kevin. Ida just joined the team. She brings 18 years of experience from Deloitte Hong Kong and Deloitte Global, where she was responsible for ISQM1 implementation, which you'll recognize as a really invaluable asset to this team, given our focus on quality management and technology. Megan is our project manager. She keeps us aligned and on track with deliverables. Thank you, Megan. Of course, we've got Ado and Nancy, who are our project board members. They've been instrumental in shaping the workstream's strategic direction. And we're going to be meeting again with Ado and Nancy in about a week in London, as well as some other people to continue to advance this project. And although we don't have Jamie and Svetlana's pictures up there, and perhaps that was something that we missed, I wanted to thank them too, because their contributions behind the scenes are very much reflected in Ado's and Nancy's perspectives. So I thank them as well. And then, of course, I have to thank James, and I have to thank Willie, and of course, I have to thank Tom, because they've been very, very involved in this project and guiding it and shaping it. Okay, with that, I think let's go to the next slide, please. So we've planned a very thoughtful and engaging session today. It's a quite long session, but I think it's going to be very energized. I get the feeling. I'll spend about 15 minutes walking you through, just building a little bit on Tom's comments, which he started out with. I think that will be a good, important background to kind of get the conversation going. I'll tell you about the backgrounds, the objective of the technology quality management workstream, and how importantly it ties to the technology position, the board's technology position. Then we'll open it up and we'll hear from the board some perspectives. And then we're going to go to our esteemed guest speaker, Riva. And as Tom mentioned, she's a leading AI governance expert, and she comes to us from NIST. She was a key, as Tom mentioned, she was on the key writing team of their very, very important framework. And their framework, incidentally, you might be interested in knowing, is a highly cited framework worldwide in academic research and in journals. We'll then take a 20-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll reconvene in this boardroom, where I'll provide a very quick orientation before we do our breakouts. And then we'll come back. We'll have a 70-minute lunch where the moderators will get a chance to compare notes. Then we'll come back and we'll report back in plenary. This is a key change that we made, and we thought it was important to bring back this report back during plenary. And then Tom's going to wrap up the day's events. So I understand that Tom's going to take some time there. Okay, that's the arc of today's session on technology. Next slide, please. Okay, I want to spend a little bit of time just going through the nuts and bolts of the work stream. And I appreciate that whenever you put a lot of words on a screen, it tempts everybody to start reading, hopefully. But I'll tell you, let me contextualize a little bit how we got here. So why this work stream? Last September, the board approved its technology position, which was a signal that it was shifting towards actively facilitating and, where appropriate, encouraging the responsible use of technology in audits and assurance engagements. Building on that, the IAASB just published last week its catalog of technology-related issues, which maps out areas for action. Today's session acts on one of those, acts on theme 3 of the catalog, and seeks to action that, which is information gathering activities. And I'll tell you a little bit more what I mean by that. And that brings us to the core of what I have on the slide here, the core question. What was the catalyst for this project? This work stream is not, as Tom mentioned, about reopening ISQM1 and ISO 220. That's very important to mention. Stakeholders continue to affirm that the strength of these principles and in those standards. That said, we're increasingly hearing that support is needed on how to apply the principles in those standards to some of the newer technologies, what we're calling emerging technologies. Tools that are often powerful and incredibly useful, but also opaque and difficult to interpret. So for example, how should firms evaluate whether a tool operates as it's designed when the tool's inner workings, like, for example, generative AI, aren't transparent? So the work stream is going to explore how our quality management standards are being applied to such technologies because they are entering assurance engagements, and whether non-authoritative guidance might enhance clarity, but also public and regulatory confidence around how firms and practitioners are managing these technologies. And I'm repeating a little bit of what Tom said here, but I think this one is worth it. Fundamentally, the work stream presumes that clarity supports innovation. And this is a message that we heard from our digital advisory group meeting last year. That was a message that resonated there. We're calling this a work stream, incidentally, and not a project, because we're in an exploratory phase of this project, of this initiative, focused on understanding. Excuse me 1 second. We're focused on understanding needs while refraining from jumping to solutions at this juncture of the project. And the term project is typically associated by our stakeholders with standard setting, which is something that we wanted to avoid. And finally, the project board members asked me to clarify what I mean by emerging tech. And what we mean here is tools that are already in use today, but also those that are in pipelines or on the horizon. So it's not focused on, we're not reacting to today. We're looking out, and we're looking to what we can anticipate. And finally, let me tell you what this work stream is not about. Willie asked me to specify this very clearly in the speaking notes. This is not about technological resources deployed by firms more broadly. So as part of a firm's, for example, their tracking of independence or HR, or tracking the progression of audits throughout their portfolio, which firms do, by the way. They track the progression. Is planning finished? Is those tools are very, very important, but this is not within the scope of our project. We are focused exclusively on technological tools used in audit and assurance engagements. That's the focus of this work stream. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide reinforces how the work stream aligns with the IAASB's technology position. That position, you'll recall, rests on two fundamental tenets. First is that technology, when thoughtfully deployed, can enhance audit and assurance quality, which is the reason why the IAASB is embracing advances in technology. And second, that technology is transforming the audit landscape. That's why the IAASB is committed to facilitating and, where appropriate, encouraging the use of technology in engagements, because that's meant to ensure that our standards remain both responsive to how audits and assurance engagements are being done, but also to ensure that our standards remain relevant in this evolving landscape. And accordingly, this work stream is very much aligned with those two fundamental tenets. Next slide, please. So I wanted to just show you a very quick visual on the roadmap here, because I think this is gonna answer a few questions that you have in your mind. Today is the official launch of the work stream. We're bringing it to the board to discuss. This is it. And then we'll solicit your views on it. We'll break out. We'll have discussions today, energetic discussions, vigorous discussions, all the adjectives. Then we're poised for 6 months of information gathering, which will include quite a bit of outreach. And I'm going to come back to that in very shortly. And then we're going to come back to the board in December with a recommendation about what the next steps could be. And then the board will deliberate. So Our initial hypothesis, as Tom mentioned, is that this work stream is not going to result in standard setting. It's going to culminate in possibly the development of non-authoritative materials. However, and Tom mentioned this as well, to be clear, we're going to follow the evidence. And I'll tell you a little bit about the posture of the work stream in a second. So next slide, please. That's okay. Thank you, Michelle. So here's the basic posture of the work stream. We're going to be evidence driven and we're going to be collaborative. Evidence driven. Let me spend a second here. Importantly, again, to reiterate maybe for the third time, there's no predetermined outcome here. This is not a disguised effort to revise standards. We're going to let the evidence tell us what the next steps are. And that evidence is going to come from our outreach and from all of the information gathering we're going to do over the next 6 months. And secondly, and also very importantly, we're going to be very intentional about inclusivity here. We want input from, and I'm going to ring out just a list here for you, so bear with me. Global networks, small and medium-sized practices around the world, regulators, including securities regulators and audit oversight bodies, academics and financial statement users, public and private sector representatives, investors, and others. Now that's a big stretch goal and ambitious goal, but that's the plan. We also recognize that different jurisdictions around the world at our various stages in their implementation journeys on technology. So we recognize that. Hence the reason why we want to do regional roundtables. We want to work with our JSS partners, which you'll recall means jurisdictional standard setters around the world, to collaborate with us, to gather the right people around the table, and to extract insights, regional insights into implementation realities in each jurisdiction. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is about what we're preliminary planning. We're right in the middle of our efforts at this point of securing dates, securing locations, JSS partners. I just had a meeting this morning with our esteemed colleagues Greg, Bill, Misha, and Renee to talk about a possible roundtable in Australia and New Zealand. But here's the basic idea. Let me just break it down for you really quickly. We want to gain a lot of insight, but at the same time we've been directed, and I think appropriately, to keep our costs manageable and down. So that's the plan. We're going to have 3 in-person roundtables around the world. One's going to be in North America, being held in New York City, co-hosted by the AICPA. So thank you, AICPA. Thank you, Brian. At their offices. This will be at the tail end of the September board meeting. And then we're going to have a European roundtable, and Accountancy Europe has expressed an interest in hosting us. So that's wonderful. We're in the middle of discussions about the Brussels roundtable. An Asian roundtable. Thank you, Zhao Yu. So the CICPA has agreed to co-host us in their facilities in Beijing. Pretty nice, right? So I've never been to China, so this is great. And then we're going to have some roundtables that are either hybrid or virtual. And here again, to keep costs down, ideally we'd like to go everywhere, but we just can't. So I mentioned Australia, New Zealand, that's in the works. Latin America, I've had a conversation with Hernan, with Amaro, and Juan Carlos, and we're going to plan a Latin American roundtable there that's going to be virtual, that's going to be in Spanish. So that's great. And then we haven't approached Sammy yet, so Sammy's going to be a little bit surprised by this. But Sammy, look out for me to reach out to you about holding something in the Middle East and Africa. And then in addition to that, of course, we have to do more we have to augment what we learn in these roundtables with one-on-one meetings and other things that we're doing, other research that we're doing currently. So on the short list for one-on-one meetings is, of course, the Forum of Firms, the Small and Medium Practices Advisory Group, but also audit regulators and securities regulators and academics, to name a few. Okay, next slide, please.
To be clear, though, what we're trying to do is anchor these outreaches to other events that are occurring at a similar time. So I think that's really important. Like, we're very conscious on not expending too many resources here and not requiring our stakeholders to have much additional travel as well. So I think that's a big thing about our philosophy in terms of outreach, is to leverage other events that are actually happening at that time.
Thank you for that, Tom. Okay, now this brings us to, what are we going to try to accomplish in these roundtables? What are the areas of inquiry? And fundamentally, I think you can distill it down to these three, and I'll tell you what these are. How are ISQM1 and ISA 220 currently being applied at firms to both seize opportunities and address the risks that are posed by emerging technologies? You know, that this one catches people offside when I write seize opportunities, and I've heard the charge, but our standards are not about seizing opportunities. Our quality management standards are in fact about seizing opportunities. A quality objective is about seizing opportunities and addressing risks. So that's the first one. The second one is, what are firms doing incrementally, some principles that they think are absolutely applicable, that are incremental to what we already have in our standards, that apply to emerging tech. So we'd love to learn some of that. Tom calls us, Tom, I'm dropping your name a few times, forgive me, as usual. Codifying. We want to understand and codify some of the great practices that are out there, and possibly even enshrine it in some non-authoritative materials. So we'll see what we learn there. But also we want to know, so we've talked a lot about firms and practitioners, what are they doing? But obviously we've got an ecosystem here to look at. And we also want to understand, what do other stakeholders perceive firms and practitioners are the relevant principles that apply, and get their thoughts on that. So that's the view to other stakeholders. And then finally, in terms of the guidance, we're looking to explore what type of guidance, if any, would in fact have us achieve our objectives of both clarifying, but also gaining regulatory and public acceptance into these practices that are in terms of managing these very, very important technologies. Next slide, please. Thank you, Michelle. Okay, and Tom, this brings us to the roundtable discussion. Hopefully, I kept it pretty short. I really do want to hear from board members. Tom, I propose that we spend about 20 minutes hearing from board members, getting their initial views and reflections about the objectives of the work stream, the scope of the work stream, and the strategic importance of the work stream. And then I think we'll go to Riva after that. To you, Tom. Thanks.
Josephine?
Angelo, thank you. I mean, this is absolutely fantastic. I'm really, really pleased with the direction here. And I may have missed it, so apologies if I missed it, but did you say within that group of people you're inviting to roundtables that you will also invite software providers?
Josephine, you did not miss it. I failed to mention that, and that is absolutely a group that will be invited. So the market is, just really, really quickly, obviously the bigger firms develop most of their technology, and the other firms acquire or license most of their technology. So we would be leaving a lot on the table if we don't invite those parties to the discussion.
Yeah, the thing I was going to say is that in the UK, the ICAAW actually have a sort of a software tech working group. So there are other tech service providers that provide little bits and pieces of other tech. So I can't get my words together this morning. I apologize. So it's not just audit software. There's sort of all these add-ons, and there's quite a big group that gather, I think, once a year at the ICAAW to talk about, upcoming changes in standards and so forth in order to set them up when they're changing their software and methodology. So I think that's really critical because they do service such a huge population of audit firms. Thank you.
Wendy?
Thank you, Tom. Having this being in my 5th year on the board and having been on the technology consultation group from the beginning, I am really pleased with the direction and the focus that we've now come to. And I look forward to your activities in the next 6 months. I think we've centered in on the right issues. We might see others as we're gathering evidence. That's probably not the word we want to use, information, data. But I really thought that agenda item 8 laid it out very well. And I look forward to the activities as they evolve. Thank you.
Sammy?
Yes, thank you, Tom, and thank you very much for the team. Just like what Josephine and Wendy said, I think it's a very smart work stream, and I think it's coming at the right time. And the beauty of it, it's I guess the way it is designed, it's getting everybody more engaged. So spot on. I just have two quick questions, or actually 3 questions. First question is that we mentioned that this work stream will only address emerging technologies in relation to engagement performance, but we're not going to address those at firm level. And my question is why we are doing it this way, especially that, when I think about the overall objective, our overall objective is to analyze what we need to do from standards point of view. Like, do we need to update ISQM1? Do we need to issue a non-authoritative guidance or non-authoritative material? So the way I think about it is that, is it going to be like after we do all this work stream and the outreach and all the information gathering, and then we decide what we need to do at engagement level, are we going to do the same procedures again to figure out what we need to do with emerging technologies related to firm level? So this is one question. The other question is similar to what Josephine mentioned about parties that we can communicate with, or like the scope of outreach. So when it comes to regulator, I don't know if it is possible to consider other regulators also, not only securities regulators and audit regulators, but also regulators of like cybersecurity and like data protection regulators. They might have a say in this as well. And my last question is more from operational point of view, with regard to the roundtables that will take place at an early stage, like the one in the US and in Europe and in Asia. Is it possible to have like remote links to these meetings if somebody would like to attend them remotely and listen to the communication that will take place in there? Thank you.
Why don't you respond to the couple of questions, then we'll take the other comments.
Yeah, sure, Tom. Thank you, Sammy. In terms of the scope, I'm interested to hear the board's views. I think my view, and certainly Willie, please jump in. My view is that if you open it up more broadly to all of these systems that the firm has to run its business, independent systems, and it becomes a slippery slope with maybe the cost benefit isn't there at this moment. Perhaps in the future we might be tempted to look to hone in on something specific that maybe there's a system that firms use that where it's leveraging some AI or something like that becomes particularly of interest from a public perspective. But I would say most of those systems are more operational and probably are not a priority at this point. In terms of experts, so Sammy, thank you for your advice. Cyber experts, data experts, certainly we need experts at the table. So we'll definitely take that back. And finally, in terms of our in-person meetings versus remote, and in person, we're hoping to keep them in person and just it's a better conversation. Although we appreciate that there will be virtual meetings, and maybe we can invite some other people to attend those. So we'll definitely keep that in mind. Hope that helps them. Thank you.
Billy?
Thank you, Tom. Just maybe in terms of the focus. So the way I think about this is, remember, in terms of ISQ 1, we have those categories of technological resources. There are 3 categories. And firstly, we are focusing on the middle category. We are focusing on technological resources used in planning and performing engagements. And then more specifically, since we've now named Winston during the week, we are focusing on the technological tools that are used in designing and performing audit procedures. So our focus is on those. When they are used, we set up, because these are things that we need to think about carefully in terms of how it affects the auditors obtaining sufficient appropriate evidence. However, remember, this is addressed at both a firm level and an engagement level. So it's very much in terms of the firm level, the obtaining of the tools, developing, testing, maintaining, implementing, validating. So Sammy, to your question, it will very much focus on the firm level as well as the engagement level.
And I saw your 10 card pop up precisely in response to this part. Is it what you want to come in on?
Yes, thank you, Tom. So I think it's right that we're focusing first on the tools that are used in engagements, both at the firm and at the engagement level. But the way I envisage it is that there's going to be belts and braces for implementing tools and technology. And those same, and my objective, and I'm one of the project board members, Sammy, is that we keep it principle-based, and a lot of those principles will apply equally to a tool that the firm will use in its own operations. And I will definitely keep a lens out for it, such that it is multi-implementable, if you will, and that we can leverage what we do here, maybe concurrently or subsequently. Thank you.
Bill?
Just 2 quick observations, and you probably know this, so excuse me if I'm insulting you, but certainly with the round tables, I sense there'll be a lot of global consistency in some of these areas that you won't find particular differences in different regions. Secondly, I'm really encouraged by the work stream and quite understand you narrowing the focus as we've discussed, but there will be an opportunity here, and participants will depart from that, and your challenge will be to contain it, and then, but also not lose some of those sparks that might come in.
Christelle?
Thank you, Tom. Just a general comment to tell that I'm fully supportive of outreach approach for the technology quality management work stream, and I sincerely appreciate it directly addresses the point I raised at the board meeting in March 2025 regarding the need for comprehensive information gathering. I'm really convinced that engaging a broad range of stakeholders and adopting an evidence-driven process will provide valuable insights and help ensure that board decisions are well-informed and responsive to the evolving technology landscape. Thank you.
Nancy?
Thank you, Tom. So Josephine's point, I really like that. And I think we should really take a good note of it when we structure our roundtables, because I think every jurisdiction will have organizations like that. So in Canada, my term is not up to date. It used to be called ITAC. And it's parallel to, I think, a similar association here in the United States. And they bring together various vendors. Right, so Microsoft's at the table, for example, but you also get some smaller software suppliers as well. So they might have a perspective, and I like us to make a note to make sure that they don't get missed. Whether they come or not is something else, but I think we should keep them in mind. The other thought is about the scope. I also am a project board member, and my view is that the team is on the right track. We need to start with something a little bit more concrete. The only advice I have would be, let's stay a little bit agile, right? Sometimes with technology, the line is not that clean, so don't get too hung up and sort of say, well, this is outside of scope and let's not deal with it. like, just like the evidence-driven attitude that we have, right? We think that it will likely end with, non-authoritative guidance, helping people understand and apply. But if the evidence collectively show that we're going to have to go further, well, that's not out of bounds. And I think this could be similar as well. So a couple of thoughts.
Thank you. Amar?
Thanks, Tom. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the team. The paper is excellent. The direction is absolutely perfect, timely, and needed, very much needed. Well, I might say that my background is mostly in the financial industry, where these tools are used significantly and growing in many, many areas. But focusing on what you are doing, and I just would like to stress the importance really to seek in these roundtables at this stage some aspect. I think you listed almost all. I just would like to stress a little bit, trying to understand also the aspects related to the points you raised here about governance, expertise and skills, model risk management, data governance, with regards to the third-party software provider, because these are the key guys for most firms that do not have the skills and the expertise to develop their own tools. So to understand this is absolutely key. Of course, I understand the largest firms have their own. They are going to respond for the very same aspects, because we need to understand how they implement governance and how they manage the risks in their own tools. It's important as well. But for software providers, it's key. And also regulators' expectations. Because, at the end of the day, responsibility for the audit is still with the person who signs the auditor report. So no matter what methodology or tools he had used. But congratulations, very nice work.
Akiko?
Thank you. Thank you so much for the team to compile all the document, and then I'm very glad to have your plan. Yeah, and especially you will outreach to world stakeholders, including AI specialists. That is very good. And my question is that I think there are some people who try to audit or assure AI itself. I don't know the use of the word of audit is right, but people start to say that. And I think it's very emerging area, but they do try to include those people in the current roundtable, or it might be the solution when we think about the ISQM 1 or going forward. So it might be the next step. So that is my question. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Angela, do you want to respond to that? And then I think we probably should transition on.
Very quick, Tom. Thank you for that opportunity. So I've heard some of you, so thank you very much for the kind words and for the comments. Getting the right people at the table is absolutely critical. Mikiko mentioned it, for sure. Josephine mentioned it, Amaro mentioned it, and Christelle mentioned it, and a few others. We're going to definitely be working with our JSS partners to make sure that we get the right people at the table. You're right. AI assurance is an emerging field. It's really critical to understand what that means. What is an AI assurance? How does that relate to our quality management standards and things like that? So we'll definitely target that. A comment was made about, I think it was Bill's comment, and Bill's quite right. I think we're going to hear similar messages across our roundtables. There's no doubt that there'll be some of that. But there will also be regional insights that emerge. And I'm confident that we're going to be able to tease those out. So I think there's a benefit there. But certainly there will be some consistency for sure. Thanks, Tom.
Okay. Is it time to welcome our guests? Do you want to do the introduction? Hi, Riva.
Good morning.
Welcome to the IAASB. And thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So Riva, just a really, really, really big thank you in advance. I reached out to Riva through LinkedIn, a cold call, and Riva responded immediately. And I thought, this is wonderful to get a person of Riva's caliber presenting to our board. And Riva's going to offer us some perspectives that are sector agnostic, right? They're not. She was one of the core writers of the NIST framework, which, as I mentioned, is cited worldwide. So Riva, we've got your bio, so in our appendix. So I won't go through too much more, and I'll pass the stage to you. Thank you very much, Riva.
Thank you, and I believe you can see my the slides. Confirming that? Great. Awesome.
Yes, we can see it.
For some reason, I can't see it on my screen. So yes, good morning. Thanks so much. Thanks to Angelo, Megan, Ida, Kevin, and everyone at IAASB for the opportunity to speak to you all today. My name is Riva Schwartz. I am a co-founder of Civitas Insights. We're a company that's dedicated to improving AI assurance, a hot topic, and also driving the value of AI and other advanced technologies by improving real-world evaluation methods. I am a measurement scientist, so I live and breathe measurement evaluation for a living. I want to back to these slides, kick this presentation off with a summary of where we kind of find ourselves in the AI conversation. Unless you have been under a rock, you know that everyone's really trying to find the best path to safely integrate generative AI and agentic AI into their business processes. But yet as we speak, there's still no golden path towards this goal. With no killer app, or many orgs are using generative AI for productivity improvements. And much more work is needed if these technologies are really going to provide real value and utility. At this point, we're really seeing this kind of issue of utility and value being reflected across the board. You can see on the slide, this is taken from Gartner's 2024 AI Hype Cycle report. You can see that the top barrier to generative AI adoption and implementation is estimating and demonstrating the value of AI. And that's really the issue we're going to focus on for this presentation. Although I would like to point out item number 2 on that list, which is just as relevant or similarly relevant, because even if or when organizations recognize how generative AI can be used in their setting, there's still a lot of competition for the talent and skills in the market right now. So my background is in linguistics, measurement science, trustworthy and responsible AI, and AI risk management. And I've spent the last 20 years in the federal government as a researcher, evaluator, and expert end user of machine learning, which has really given me a front row seat to the progress of these technologies as they improve every so often. And now we are in this huge explosion. And what we're faced with right now is a bit of a bottleneck, where we have this kind of unprecedented growth in AI system capabilities, but the way we make sense of AI and AI's outcomes or derive any value from these technologies has really not been able to keep pace. This obviously kind of the common theme that we see in any kind of advancements in technology. In many ways, we've seen this movie before. There's certainly no doubt that AI is going to bring enormous change to any organization, but we can still actually use and adapt many of our existing governance practices to harness AI's full potential and reduce the barriers to its safe adoption. But we do have to get over the bottleneck. So how can we move things along as quickly as possible? Well, you can, the interesting thing about AI is that while we talk about managing it, we can also use it to address these challenges. I'm not actually going to talk about that today because, believe it or not, I think the big story of AI is actually people. AI is designed, developed, deployed, and used by people, and the data that underlie AI technology, the models, is also almost not entirely, but almost entirely about people. So the current AI assurance environment is kind of similar to the beginning of the software boom, where everything is kind of everything that's being discussed is kind of exclusively by and for the people who build the technology. And that makes sense. But if your job is to govern, manage, or use AI, you may not be getting the information you need to demonstrate its value in your setting or its safety, or reliability, robustness, you name it. So my company's focus is to fuel technology with real-world practical utility, and we mocked up a comprehensive view of AI, which we refer to as the AI assurance hierarchy of needs. So instead of having to jump back and forth between thinking of AI as only its technological aspects, or spending all of our time thinking about the technological aspects, and then separately, a completely different group of people thinking about what it means for the public, for our society, for our organizations, the economy, you name it. This frame really allows us to get a better handle of AI's value in the real world, so we can manage and govern it. So you can see we have 3 mountain ranges that all connect. We start at the bottom with the AI stack, and this is where we're talking about positions like designers and developers of AI, who are driving the future of what AI can do. So these are the discussions all mostly focused around new capabilities, and these are assessed at the system output level. So again, what can AI do? But in the deployment context, we need, we move up one layer, and we can now talk about what does it actually do in context. This is the domain of deployers, adopters, users, people who oversee, manage, and govern tech within organizations. And then we are all trying to understand AI's outcomes in context. At the next level, we have multi-sector. And this is really even one level higher or many levels higher. What does it all mean? At this level, we have policymakers, the C-suite, other researchers in other domains, and all of whom are trying to figure out how AI is going to affect a given sector, the workforce, the economy, so we can all stay ahead of trends. Now, this framing works across the entire AI assurance domain, but I'm really just going to focus on governance. And starting from the bottom up with the AI stack, the focus here is, of course, on system requirements to get these capabilities out to everyone, and then the processes needed to make sure that systems operate within those requirements. And you can see some, example outcomes that hit the news in some way. We are all, every day there's, new reporting about what has happened, good and bad. This is where we see things like AI hallucinations, concerns about security and privacy risks, other negative outputs like stereotyped images or other forms of harmful content, things like model outputs of protected information, such as copyright and intellectual property, and just other outputs related to privileged, sensitive, or private information. So these are real challenges and risks. I spent a lot of time thinking about these risks and when I was in the government, and especially when I was at NIST. But it is really difficult to govern and manage these types of risks only at the AI stack level. Why is it insufficient? Because system outputs do not happen in a vacuum. We measure them right now through benchmark outcomes, but these outputs affect people in the real world. And what happens, for example, when privileged content gets out into a given setting, figuring that out is a lot more complex than what we can observe in the AI stack. We need to know how often these types of impacts are happening, the conditions under which they happen, who they're more likely to happen to. And right now, those kind of foundational questions, we have very few answers for. Since so much of the conversation in AI is taking place in the AI stack, focused on the development of these advanced capabilities, our ability to kind of discern what happens in deployment has not kept pace. And we have a real lack of real-world data about impacts, again, both good and bad, making it difficult to make decisions about how to manage and govern these systems. So using hallucinations as an example, you see a couple of these cases on headlines about these cases. We see a lot of stuff from the legal sector where lawyers are getting fined for having fake cases in their legal briefs, which is impacting adoption of these tools in legal settings. It's also bigger, though, than problematic system outputs. We also see impacts where users become emotionally entangled with AI chatbots. And these systems can appear to be very human-like to end users and create negative impacts, sometimes causing considerably catastrophic harms. Now, these types of challenges have to be assessed in the deployment context, since we need much more granularity to observe them than what we can ever see in the AI stack, where we're just focusing on what happened inside the box itself. So let's move up one more level. This is one we refer to as the multi-sector. And this is where we can begin to gain some kind of strategic sense of what value we get out of AI and understand its longer term effects to a given organization or an industry sector and beyond. You can see some headlines here about generative AI's negative impacts, which can cause reputational risk. These are the kinds of things governance strategies are designed to make sure don't happen. But another relevant factor here is the workforce, which has to be reviewed at this macro level, since it's way bigger than anything that can certainly not be observed in the AI stack and also not in deployment. So the hierarchy can be used to clarify governance needs like other frameworks. Any risks that I observe through testing in the deployment context can help me stay focused on what matters for my setting. So let's say my organization, we do some testing, we find out that there's hallucinations. So maybe that's not a problem if I'm in a creative industry and I need these like creative aspects of that come with generative AI and AI hallucinations to maximize, what I'm doing. But if I'm the legal sector, that's definitely a problem, and it's going to be at the top of my list of risks. So now, with that information, I can prioritize these risks, review my existing policies and practices within the organization, and figure out, what needs updating and how to update it. And this kind of well-honed prioritization also makes it possible to move up my AI governance maturity level and build out this really important thing, which we talk about a lot in AI risk management, risk-aware culture. And that's a culture that's not so much thinking about, marking things off on a checklist, but anticipating how to maximize the positive aspects of AI and while also ensuring that negative things don't happen. So let's go back through this process from top to bottom and get more specific about what you can find out and how to apply this knowledge. In the multi-sector, this is where I'm going to be gathering knowledge from trends, so I can make decisions about trends. Which economic indicators to pay attention to if I'm focusing on AI adoption, which jobs might be gaining ground in the AI market if I want to get a leg up on finding that talent, large scale changes to how people engage with these technologies. All of these are things that I can track and I'm going to want to stay on it, the things related to my sector. Another example, we know that ads are going to be deployed on chatbot platforms. How is that going to change everything? And what do I need to do to take advantage of this shift, but also maintain my risk posture? The deployment context is where you get much better insights into what your staff, your clients, your audience, other audiences are doing, a broad set of stakeholders are doing when they actually use AI, along with any challenges they're having. That kind of data is not easily accessible unless you capture it yourself right now. So how do you do that? We like to refer to this process as structured stakeholder or structured public feedback mechanisms. You can use red teaming exercises. You can seek independent third-party evaluators to test or audit your systems. You can do A/B testing, other types of audience testing. You can test inside your organization by either just surveying your staff and system operators to find out whether they need upskilling to more effectively use AI for their jobs. But all of this is helping you find out whether the big picture. What is the AI doing? How well is it functioning? Is it acting as intended? Based on all of what you find, you can update organizational roles and responsibilities, adapt your risk tolerances. And then another thing this helps do, which seems kind of small, but is huge, is it helps you narrow down this, flood of information about what you actually need to pay attention to, because there is, like, every single day is just an enormous amount of noise to cut through in AI right now. So, and now we're back to the AI stack. Most of the time, what we've found is, people are really chasing different types of output in the AI stack, trying to manage things. But so you're down in the weeds, you have no kind of strategic sense of what's actually happening. But now that you have this broader set of direct information from what's happening in deployment, you have key market indicators to sense where things are heading. You can drive governance policies and practices in the AI stack more effectively. You can set up third-party controls to flag any input that doesn't match what you expect to see based on what you got, this evidence that you gathered in the deployment context. You can update your data preservation policies and processes to ensure that the data remains confidential and secure. And you can set up targeted risk response protocols. So this can include running response exercises, on a certain cadence, and then you can share those outcomes within your organization and across your sector. So I just want to switch gears before we interesting. Doesn't want to go to the next slide. Fascinating. Sorry about that. Oop, there we go. Okay. Sorry about that. I will just say, I do want to mention a few common questions about deploying AI. First one here is, how can I know that the system's doing what it's supposed to do? A lot of people get swept up in measuring explainability and interpretability, which is an incredibly important set of characteristics that people need to stay on top of. In explainability and interpretability help users understand how a system is functioning. It can enable system debugging and monitoring, which is useful for auditing and governance, but it also helps people, helps us understand whether the output is understandable to users. That's to understand, but I think that what people are really looking for probably is more about transparency into whether the system's doing what you think it's doing. This is what, measurement and evaluation are all about. You can measure systems directly, again, in the deployment context. We talked about red teaming, but you can also use things like internal sandboxes. This is where you can have a segment of your staff or your end users interact with the technology under conditions that are similar to deployment or directly related to deployment. This can include red teaming. So a couple more words on what red teaming is. Red teaming is really borrowed from cybersecurity, and it's where different types of testers are interacting with AI systems in an adversarial manner. They are trying to break some aspect of the technology or many aspects of it to produce a pre-specified violation. So say you've created a specific guardrail that operationalizes some organizational policy. Maybe you want to be sure that nobody is inadvertently or purposely leaking your proprietary information into the model that you're running in your org. You can set up red teaming exercises to test how well that guardrail is standing up. You can also just have a segment of your staff test the system as a form of field testing over a certain period of time. You can ask third-party evaluators to test your technology with a different variety of auditing processes. And third-party systems and controls also have to be sufficiently tested for this alignment as well, to make sure that your internal policies, that it can adhere to them. And all of these test outcomes can be publicly shared to increase transparency. Another question, how do I protect my organization from adaptive models? You can implement security measures through your organizational policies to prevent unauthorized access to the model, make sure that the model is not being tampered with. This does get back to guardrail testing, auditing access controls to maintain system integrity and confidentiality, all of that aligned to your organizational risk tolerance. And here's some other policies that might be useful here. You can mandate that your staff only use approved prompting strategies. And a big one that I think is really important is make sure that the way the model interacts with people is not anthropomorphized. Right now, people really like it, that it seems like we're talking to a friend, but that overly familiar way of engagement can cause people to let their guard down and overshare. And depending on what application you're using, some of that data becomes public. There was just a bunch of stories this week about Meta's new AI platform. Other important factors here to consider are monitoring for drift, model drift, concept drift, data drift. These are definitely going to happen over time anyway. That's what this technology does. But if you lock down your system too much, you're not going to reap the benefits of the system. So this is, where testing can help you determine, the best trade-off where your sweet spot is. And then this last one on data is always a big question because it is definitely, the oil that runs the engine of AI. It presents many opportunities and risks. So you're going to want to manage it like any other of your valuable resources. But the best tool for governing AI data is data set documentation. You're going to want to use documentation not to just manage the computational aspects of data, but tracking and documenting the governance aspects as well. So this includes, who are the people, we're getting back to the people point here, who are the people who have access to the data, who've cleaned it, who have otherwise engaged with it, who are using these data sets, who created the data sets. There's data set life cycles that you can take on board for tracking. So in the early stages of those life cycle, you're talking about data set formulation and design, the construction of the data, how was it collected, how was it processed, what types of annotation and labeling was used. And then you can move towards data analysis and visualization. It all ends with data storage and how to properly and safely decommission the data sets. You can also leverage measurement here. You're talking things like measuring data quality, data provenance, which is a big topic related to deepfakes. And then like everything, just like everything throughout this entire presentation, you really have to consider the trade-offs. For data documentation, the trade-off is really how extensive do you want your documentation practices to be, because if they're too onerous, people are not going to follow them at all. So I will leave that. I will leave it there. I will stop sharing, I guess, and take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Riva. That was really informative and helpful. Any board members have any questions for Riva? Ada?
Yes, thank you, Riva. That was great. You've mentioned, or you're talking about governance and controls that entities can apply to them, and it's not light. There's quite a bit that you need to build around it. You've also mentioned that you don't want to close down your system too much because how relevant will it be in a year from now? So and I just want to test something with you, because the view I'm developing is that within an entity or within an audit firm, you will have closed systems where you will monitor the data and the operation of the AI along the lines with the controls that you clarified. But you'll also have some open systems that use data from the web, and where the controls are probably much more on the output, and where the user needs to verify whether that output of the AI is reliable by checking the sources and whether the thinking and the logic applied by the AI, because you can interrogate that through the AI, is sensible, such that it is much more of a support mechanism for decision making or for an activity. Is that where you see it happening as well? Because I don't think that you can, if let's say that an organization allows ChatGPT to be part of some of their work, well, there's no way you can build controls around it to just automatically rely on the output that it provides. At least that's what I think.
Yeah.
But I may be entirely wrong. But
Right.
I would like to get your perspective on it.
Yeah, I think that's right. And depending on, how different your, the conditions that you're deploying it in relate to, if you have some very specific carve out of how it's being used, you're going to need to, that's an environmental change. So you're going to want some, intelligence on what that looks like compared to what the the sense and of metrics that you have from what either your third party org gave you or what what you see elsewhere. So it's in an AI evaluation, it's really a game of conditions, even more so than regular software because it is constantly adapting, and so much of it relates to the different settings and the people who are interacting with it. So if you have, your kind of policies locked down and you're like, telling people these are the only prompts you can use, you make sure, a lot of other settings are in place, then, you're creating, that's great, but you're also creating like a standard, a slight difference. So the conditions under which we test are constantly changing. That's just the thing to recognize is the dynamic nature. And so if you're measuring in this kind of static setting, you do need some way to pull down the more dynamic behavior.
Thank you. Neil?
Riva, thank you very much. Really insightful and great to get your thoughts. You spoke briefly around confidentiality. That's some of the chat type environments that creates this informal sort of feel, and maybe you can overshare. Auditors are dealing with lots of confidential information. Can you share a little bit about using AI but maintaining the confidentiality of the information that's used in the processes?
Yeah, great question. So you can use AI. First of all, you can use AI to do any of these things. You can use AI to red team AI. You can do AI to audit AI. So you need to, set up a different test harness or different processing. It's not really a test. Maybe it's a test, some kind of harness to make sure that it's staying on top of the outputs and that it's tracking it. And actually, those do work relatively well because you can, until they don't, because you can really narrow especially if you can narrow the types of challenges that you expect to see. And you would need, data, evidence to know what are the big challenges. But yes, you can deploy automated approaches to and leverage AI to support those confidentiality efforts.
Angela?
Riva, thank you. Riva, as you were speaking, I was thinking a little bit about how your messaging might come across to the board in terms of, it sounds like lots of things that we need to do to manage the space. And there probably is a lot that we need to do to manage the space. But your framework, I had the privilege of reading it again over the weekend. It starts off by saying, how do we capitalize on this technology? And these are the things that we do in order to capitalize on this technology. So it's not about let's preclude the use of this because it's too powerful and too useful to industries worldwide, including assurance circles. I wonder if you can speak a little bit about that, about it's not all negative. It's about how do we manage this in a useful way and also in a scalable way, depending on what the organization's needs are and what they're using the technology for. Your thoughts?
Excellent. Yeah, and it's a great question. And one thing that we, when we were developing the AI risk management framework, that we, kind of got some pushback against this idea originally, but it's not NIST just saying it, or the idea that risk can result in positive and negative impacts. So we don't really think, we tend to think, at least the English word of risk, we tend to really perceive as always a negative thing. But it can result, not all risks can result in positive impacts, but there are risks that can result in positive impacts. And so that is why, you know, kind of creating a risk-aware culture where we're thinking about what are the things that we see happening. Is it a risk? If it is a risk, is it something we need to tamp down, or is it something we need to kind of think about how to maximize the benefits of it, and also reduce the negative pieces? I will say, like, you know, so the framework has, I used to say this all the time, the framework has 72 subcategories. It sounds like a lot of things. You don't have to do all of them, but it is comprehensive in the sense that that gives you 72 opportunities to you know, figure out what's going to work for you. We used to tell people, and you know, I know my colleagues at NIST still do, that you know, pick the top 5 things that you can do. Or you know, we have 4 functions: map, measure, manage, and govern. If you're just focusing on governance, you know, pick one from each of the main categories in governance and really dig deep on that for your specific sector, for your specific organization, and try and adopt those, and then come back around and see what else you can do on it. But a lot of the things that are in, especially in the governance section, in some way, if you ladder up, you know, high enough, these are things that a lot of organizations already do for cybersecurity, already do them for privacy, already do for just enterprise risk management. And now, you know, applying it to AI is going to be different. So instead of seeing it as, oh, great, now I have to, you know, implement this whole new set of framework, you know, whole new framework, whole new set of controls, there are things that are going to look like what you already have internally. And I also do want to shout out a reminder that April of last year, or August, we released the final version of the generative AI profile for the AI risk management framework, which has also specific controls for how to manage the risks of generative AI, and where 12 specific risks are laid out in that.
Thank you. Riva, one of the things I'm thinking about is how to deploy AI in a regulated sector, such as, you know, financial services audit would clearly deal with it. And in our world, there's some things that are pretty essential, or at least taken as golden rules, like the concepts of completeness and accuracy. And in a world of data science, those terms don't really have the same meaning. Like, how complete, how accurate do you need to have an AI model in terms of data to be powerful and useful to serve its purpose? And how do you deal with that tension between regulators who want certainty and those things that are just making good progress? And to me, like, the choice could be a bad choice. Is like, the alternative for the regulated firm could be is to opt out because he can't meet the regulatory hurdle, even though that the tool would be better. And how do you work with firms in the regulated sector to think through these issues?
Yeah, excellent question. We spent a lot of time, you know, in developing the framework, kind of teetering between these two, you know, like the regulated world, finance. We've heard a lot from the financial services sector and healthcare, and then, you know, kind of this wild west of everybody else who were saying, well, whoa, you know, we don't want to be beholden to all of these you know, guardrails. Although you know, the people would tell us in the financial services industry that having those guardrails really helps, right? Because now I know what I'm supposed to operate in. Model risk management is something we thought a lot about and used kind of these core principles from model risk management as part of the map, measure, and manage and govern functions. So I think there's a lot that's already in there. I don't think that we can get this completely accurate. And I would argue, I would point to, the goal of risk management, at least from the NIST AI risk management framework perspective, is trustworthy and trustworthy AI built in a responsible setting, for responsible deployment and use. We define trustworthy AI. I should have had that slide up, but didn't. It is as having 7 characteristics. The most foundational to that, we did not. You'll notice we didn't actually have accuracy as the core part of trustworthy AI. We actually have validity and reliability, because if your processes are valid, if your test processes are valid, if you have statistical validity, you don't have to worry as much, right? It's not about whether it's actually higher level than whether it performs accurately. It's like, are your tests producing what you think they're producing? If you're measuring, customer churn, does it actually measure that, or is it measuring something else? And in AI, if you're measuring, leakage of private information, but your test doesn't take into consideration the fact that there's task contamination and that the models just has the answers to the test, then your system's not valid. So you're not really measuring what you think you're measuring. But I think that the financial services setting and healthcare and regulated industries are much more likely to have valid processes, valid tests, because of those requirements. So that instead of so accuracy kind of gets you like, did you get the right question? I'm going to look in the back of the book. I want to look at the answer key. Did I get the right answers? Validity is it actually operating as you say? It may not be getting the right answer every time, but it's really hard to compare these two concepts. But validity means I'm getting, I trust that these systems have integrity, that when I test these systems, it's going to be producing the outcome that I want. Those outcomes that I expect. Those outcomes are generalizable and they're credible. Like they are sound. I can trust them, which is a higher bar than accuracy and completeness.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other questions from the group? Well, this has been super helpful. We're about to take the benefits of your insights and the benefits of all the work that we've done and sort of workshop a little bit about what are the right paths forward to thinking about in our regulated world, what useful guidance we could build, particularly in the world of sort of governance and quality management. And so I think it couldn't have been set up any better. And hopefully we could continue to call upon you as our board does its work. So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Thanks so much. See you all later.
Bye. Bye. See you. Okay, so maybe Bill?
Question to Angelo. The AI risk management framework that she referred to, is that easily accessible? I'm sure you have gone through the process rather than me Googling it and trying to find it. Is it a manageable size? What, can you give me some more information?
Yeah. Absolutely. There's a link to it in the private document that I distributed, but nevertheless, I will also send it out. But I'll also send it out in PDF. It's about a 70-pager, I believe. It's not War and Peace. But anyway, I'll send that over.
Yeah, there's a lot to absorb there. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll send it over.
Okay. So maybe, Angela, would it be a good idea to turn it back to you and you explain what's coming next?
Yeah, Tom, happy to do that. And maybe Michelle can help me. Michelle, if we can go right to the last slide. Thank you, Michelle. So we're gonna take our break now. I was thinking that rather than have you come back to this room and then go to your breakouts, let's just take your break and go straight to the breakouts. And what I've advised the moderators and supporting staff is that there are no right answers here. There's just exploration. So we've got, it turns out that questions 1 and 2 that I had provided to you in your private document, private for the workshop, could probably be fused into one question. Ado pointed out that there's some redundancies there, and he's right. So we've condensed those or merged those. So we've got 3 questions essentially. So we'll talk about those in our groups, moderated by the moderators, and then the moderators will sit together during lunch a little bit, distill down some of the great insights that we hear, and then we'll bring it back in plenary with a report back. But that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, any questions? People know where they're meant to go and what they're meant to do? Okay, we're gonna take a break right now. Convene in your respective rooms at 10:40. Those sessions will go for 90 minutes, and we'll have lunch, and then we'll come back to public session at 1:20 p.m. So we'll catch you then. Okay, thank you.
Let me get out of this.